All right, so for the time that we have, we'll try to divide equal amount of time among our panelists so that they can cover the questions that we have prepared for them. So I'll start with you, Dr. Artin. You mentioned something about the development of individual for the self-identity, which in traditional cultures, that is normally not the way that values are taught or children are raised. So in traditional cultures, usually is about restricting a woman's role and basically taking away a lot of individualistic freedom. In your opinion, what are some of those factors that are limiting females' roles in those traditional cultures? Some of the solid issues that you come across in your practice and in your teaching that we could identify with and understand better. Why is it that these traditional cultures give women such a restricted role? And also, why is it that even women themselves promote these restrictions and abide by them? Thank you.
In fact, this was the initial topic of my discussion until I started. My other colleagues have covered this topic more or less. I was thinking about the factors like biological factors, like cultural factors, economical factors, etc. that affects the way women are. Some of those factors are common in all cultures. As an example, the biology is the same in all cultures. The woman, there is a difference between men and women. They are 50% lighter than men. Women are 50% lighter than men. They have a smaller brain size, yet proportionally is the same as men. They have less muscles, less physical strength. There are hormonal changes, etc. All of those are very, very important. And then depending on who has the authority, that some people could take advantage of. Then that's what has happened. As an example, if somebody says, I need help, and the other person is dominant, etc., then they will take advantage of this need for help. This is the biological factor that just come to my mind. In terms of cultural factors, throughout the history, as other colleagues today mentioned, religion has had a significant impact, in my opinion, and all religion, all male-dominated. I was surprised that African said Baha'i is somewhat neutral. So Baha'u'llah might have been the first prophet feminist, apparently, if I'm not mistaken. And I consider myself, although I'm a male, as a feminist. But the fact is, all religion have been male-dominated, and that's serving the men. God himself is men. Who refers to God as a she is always referred as he. I'm sorry? Yes. Yeah. So those are the two very, very important. And then comes a political factor and economical factor. Political factor, again, who has access to power, who has political power. Again, whoever is dominant, whoever has more power, and those factors have a role in that. And again, economical factor also is by whoever has the highest income, highest economical power. All of those are very important in the way the society is functioning, and therefore, in my opinion, women overall are a minority. Some people, they say, no, we are not a minority, but minorities mean not to have less power than some other group, and some other people, etc. And therefore, I see them, women as a minority still, even in the most developing society.
All right, so what we can summarize here is that women's role being restricted in those traditional cultures is basically perhaps because of their physicality, their religious beliefs, which is embedded in very early childhood, and also political. So those are some identifying factors we can think about. So if some change perhaps in those areas could bridge the gap between men and women?
No, of course, we mentioned the factors, and then what is the next? The next is always this recommendation for change. That's why I put it down. And change doesn't come so immediately. There are changes possible. One of them is through extreme actions and revolution, and we know it has always more harmful than helpful. I don't know any useful revolution or violence that has brought me really through through peaceful outcome. So the change, yes, it is very important to push for change, and as you mentioned, one of our panelists mentioned, that education is the key. This is what we are doing, in fact, one of the factors, one of the aspects of how to overcome this. I think the more informed we are, which means the more we know about each other, and then probably we are more equipped to solve problems. And one of these, if we know about it, that really there is a discrepancy of how women and men are treated, then we'll be able to tolerate change towards eliminating any discrepancy and discrimination against other gender.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Well, you mentioned education. That's a great segue. Maybe we can start with Dr. Curry. Is that okay? So you'll be answering the next question. You mentioned in your talk that education is perhaps the solution to bridging the gap between men and women and male and female differences. One solution perhaps would be that. And you also mentioned a comprehensive educational system. You mentioned Africa and Pakistan as they have made some segues and some progress in that area. Well, let's come back home to the United States of America. Here, as some research suggests, and some studies have shown, even in America, which perhaps has the most modern and Western culture, education is pretty biased here in this country, and also is very much gender-oriented. For example, our teachers in classrooms have favoritism towards males. They ask male students more questions. They will allow them to speak more. All of those are problems that we're dealing with in today's educational system in America. So in your opinion, what kind of comprehensive educational system could educate everyone, including teachers, parents, students themselves, so that we can all be well rounded? So should we talk about spiritual education? Should we talk about whole child education, or should we talk about academic child? Which comprehensive educational system will perhaps help us bridge the gap? Thank you.
That's a very complex question.
Yes, let's solve the portals problem right now.
For me, it's an integration approach and a holistic approach, and I think I talked a little bit about that holistic approach. The integrated education system really combines in terms of the knowledge base, but look at the whole person, the whole child approach. Some of you may have seen the report that you refer to. Even the most conscientious teacher, when she was shown that she was asking boys questions more often. This is a study done by UNAW, University of Women.
That's right.
That the teacher was in shock that she was supposed to be a person that was much more awareness, had heightened awareness about gender equality, yet she couldn't believe herself the behaviors was manifested, that she was having exhibited gender biased behavior as a teacher. So the reflective awareness, I think all of us have that issue, is that when we say that we believe in the elimination of prejudice, or we believe in gender equality, that we need to examine our own behaviors more deeply. That was the reflective part of what I was saying. So our system, the education system, the first step is that we can get onto a continuous improvement process where we can examine our curriculum, our behavior, our inclusiveness, or our exclusivity of our system itself from a 360 in a spherical way. Then we can address where the gaps are and then try to bridge the gap from that standpoint. It's almost like trying to fix the airplane while it's still flying. We don't have the liberty of stop everything, okay, let's start from scratch. That would be a dream come true. We don't have that luxury. So we must do the redesign while the system is still going. So that's in a very general and broad sense. But I don't believe that in our system right now we have an integrated approach. And that's the part that for me, when I say the divine design, is that integration really requires the integration of our humanness, which is what this foundation is talking about, the making of the human, and that's the education process in itself. But the making of the human on the physical side, that will be only 50%, because to me, what makes humans different is that we are spiritual beings. So are we spiritual beings trying to be human, or are we human beings trying to be spiritual? I happen to believe that we're spiritual beings trying to be humans. Therefore, to reject, to ignore, to avoid the spiritual side in the totality of the educational process will be shortchanging ourselves as humankind.
Excellent. Excellent acknowledgement. Yes, thank you. So parents not only should be aware of humanistic characteristics of children, but also to individual differences and be responsive to that child's emotions as they represented. Thank you very much for that. Now, with that, shall we go to Dr. Carey? Yes, I do want to, yes. Dr. Carey, you mentioned the differences in cultural values in male and female. And you also mentioned something about males having an egocentric view of cultural values and females having a community view on cultural values. Well, there have been a lot of studies on that, as you all know. And one of the studies was done by Carol Gilligan, who mentioned that females have morality of care, and males have morality of justice, which draws a distinction between morality and values of male and female, as if we both have two separate values. Well, if we accept that as researchers, research is always questionable, and that's why we continue to do research. We never have one answer for everything. But if we consider that as to be somewhat accurate, how can two different cultural values work together in order to bring the differences and use them for the betterment of not only raising children, but also for improving our society? So two different cultural values, how can they live together and be complementary together, would be the question.
Thank you for the question. The question was probably more profound than my answer. But the answer is, I would say, using again my Baha'i faith, unity in diversity, which is an amazing principle. I think the ego-centered and socio-centered, the ego-centered man and the socio-centered man, or societies, do very well together, because it's through the egocentrism of patriarchy that we have developed the civilizations and expanded them to the point that they are. Somebody asked me during the break that how does this religious beliefs in traditional societies, as I mentioned, contributed at any level to the advancement in these civilizations? And I said, of course it did. The religious beliefs in these societies, the major traditional religions, that they valued men over women and patriarchy, they contributed to the advancement of those civilizations. They allowed men to control resources of society and create what we see right now. I mean, the development of societies, in traditional societies, was the development of major economic, political, again, religious, family, education, and so on. That happened because men were very egocentric, and they were competing for achievement and collection of wealth, and therefore, for example, capitalism developed, and capitalism was collection of wealth and capital in the hands of the few, and what did they do with it? They built all the roads and the factories and the manufacturing and brought us to the industrial society. And then again, the same force of man, basically the mind, brought us into post-industrial societies, the information and service industry. So it's now time for women qualities, the socio-centered qualities of women. I don't think these qualities of women could have brought us to where we are. The reason we got here was because man got us here. But it's now for us to move toward a more egalitarian society because women are the same as men in terms of their knowledge, capabilities, and so on. And so we can incorporate, and as I said, the Baha'i faith said that now it's time to bring in both feminine and masculine qualities together for the advancement of our civilization.
Excellent. So the egocentric view of man, and by that I mean man, has been determined by the journey that he has gone through. And as we all know, males, and that means you gentlemen, have gone through 3 transformations so far. You know, the community man that used to build farms together, and now the self-made man that was the industrial age that you were talking about, that, you know, we all moved from farms and we had to build our own house. And by that, we, I mean the men. And of course, today's man that is a passionate man, which means you can cry at the movies, if it's a sad movie, and then no one will think that you are not a man, or less than a man, right? Thank you very much. Nicely done. Can we go to Mr. Riazetti? Is that okay? Thank you very much. So you talked about the biology of male and female and the connection of that to identity. Well, can we discuss Freud for a little bit? Now, in Freud's theory, he developed gender identity by the way of that males have to differentiate from mother. Very early on, this happens between 3 and 5 years of age, that a male child differentiates from mother and affiliates with father. Therefore, the male learns to emotionally separate themselves and identify with what makes more sense to them. Females, on the other hand, according to Freud, do not go through that process. It's only one process, and that is the affiliation with mom. So females, in his opinion, or theory, I shouldn't say opinion, really it's a theory that he researched upon, females never learn to emotionally separate themselves. Well, if that is the case, if we kind of consider Freud for a second, then how is not biology relative to our gender identity? How can we then ignore biology, and what would your answer be to that? Thank you.
Well, first of all, if I understand Freud a little bit, he does not say that biology actually defines a person. It actually says that it is a context that if other factors also play in, it can have an effect.
Excellent.
But I also happen to differ with Freud and perhaps be inclined more with Adler and Jung that the power of decision and power of force of the will to meaning, as Viktor Frankl called it, is more important than any other force in the world. That is to say, that what I tried to say in my presentation was that do not try to define any human being based on his biological structure, gender, sex, nationality. Rather than that, there is a transformation which defines human. And if we concentrate on that, we realize that we are not going to create a reverse civilization. A civilization which was male-dominated that brought us to here. And now we want to create a revengeful path and give a woman's orientation. Rather, I think now is the time, as Jung mentioned beautifully, and I think Abdul Baha Abbas mentioned, and if you can see it also in the biblical statements, that there is no male, there is no female. This is a very powerful statement in the Bible. The reality of man, human, is the thought process, is not really the gender. So the intention is, although Freud is right, that biology has an impact, but it is not fully defines human being. This is why I go more with what Adler taught in this regard, that you are a human if you can tolerate adversity and use the adversity as a context to create a better condition for the next person who follows you. So, as you can see, it is a context.
So by power of decision, you mean, are you referring to power of cognition?
No, I actually say what Melody emphasized, Dr. Bacon, which basically is mainly at what Carl Jung and more importantly, examples of it was shown by Viktor Frankl in a search for meaning, search for ultimate meaning, that if you find value, if you find meaning, and you believe in that meaning, and you are ready to sacrifice everything that you have for the validity of that meaning, then you can make a change. So your definition is your value system. But the way that you are making sure that you go transgender is when your value is not Persian, American, Kurdish. It is the value which benefits humankind as a whole. And when you go that far, then you start the process of transformation and education. And this is what we mean, that power of decision comes, as Dr. Bacon mentioned, unless you have values. Whatever decision you make even is driven by emotion. And the emotion, although it is kind of cognition, but perhaps, as Jung and Adler described it very well, is a distorted cognition or distorted emotion.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you very much for that. Well, speaking of Dr. Bacon, can we now go to Dr. Bacon? Well, in your talk, you referred to emotional freedom. And in order to achieve emotional freedom, one needs to not only identify triggers, but change assumption and change perspectives. Well, in today's busy life, we're lucky to get food on the table and give baths to everybody, younger than 7, and then put everybody to bed, in order so that we can go take care of all the other things that are part of that. In your opinion and in your practice, and what can we do in our busy lives to take the time to do what you mentioned and you gave us, your perspective on, in order to stop, for example, smell the roses, in order to do the 3 steps that you mentioned in order to achieve emotional freedom? Thank you.
Good question. I think we all struggle with that. The power of what they call the tyranny of the urgent. There's always something that has to be done now. And I think, unfortunately, with the internet, it's only gotten worse because the more you go on, the more there is to find, and pretty soon an hour is gone and you've lost yourself. So I like to harken back to the spiritual tradition a lot of religions have of a Sabbath. And that was a sacrifice of time, not only for God or, for your religious community, but for yourself. And we've kind of lost that notion in our culture of taking and setting aside time because, from my own experience, you feel like you're wasting it. That we don't, to get back to what Alex was talking about, Jung's notion of feminine and masculine, a feminine ideal, from that kind of a quality, is receptivity and being I think our culture, as we've already noted on the panel, the value and the benefit of a masculine orientation of a linear, goal-directed, A to Z in a straight line has been the achievement of technology and innovation. But what we've paid the price is the neglect of feminine attributes, and that was Yun's point as well, of being receptive and waiting and allowing things to unfold. An image of the feminine is a spider, for example. A spider spins a web and waits for something to happen, but she's very active in that creation of the ability to come and be receptive. So I see that setting aside time, and I always suggest 5 minutes in the evening or morning, because 5 minutes in our culture seems like an eternity when you're not doing anything. And maybe centering with either an image, a word, following your breath, or music, something, and letting go of thoughts. That is, and it has been shown in research, that it's a cumulative effect. In other words, the more you do that, the more able you are to go through the rest of the day being more productive and being able to look at life differently than just one task after another. But it is a discipline, and I think that's the other thing that we forget. There is a usefulness in discipline that gives you more freedom, ironically, that limits give people freedom. And, the benefit of that is that when you discipline yourself to take 5, 10, 15 minutes a day, you can't point to, oh, if I did that, that happened, but overall, you will find that your life is more thoughtful and you're much better able to respond to things rather than react. But it's counterintuitive to our culture because we tend to have a to-do list and we do things. So we're asking people to develop an aspect of themselves. That gets back to Alex's point, which is that's where we are right now in our development as a culture.
So we have to make a conscious decision. And perhaps after a while doing this, it will become systematic.
That's right.
Well, meditation would be an example of that?
Prayer, meditation, contemplative practices, quieting yourself down, and opening yourself up to, if you put it in the spiritual context, to God. But not in a way of talking. That kind of prayer there's a place for that. But this is more of a contemplative prayer, which says, I'm going to just sit and wait. And again, that's for Americans waiting. No, we don't wait. We make things happen. And yet, when you do wait, it takes talk about being non-egocentric. Your ego is not in control at that moment when you're waiting. You don't know what's going to happen and when, and that makes me uncomfortable. I like to know things. But I trust that waiting for God to show up on his or her time, something will happen.
Excellent. Yes.
And I don't know.
So perhaps this is kind of like remapping your brain. As we
Yes,
know,
it
our
is.
brain is the most flexible part of our body.
That's right.
And can you reshape and reshape? Excellent. Thank you very much. Now, in this part, I know we all want to give a round of applause. Thank you. Now, taking what Dr. Curry said, and this is time a call to action, which means I'm going to use what you said, which I really liked. What you said, Dr. Curry, was that let's not be passive audience, but be active participants. So in order to be active participants, I'm going to actively ask you if you have any questions, specific questions, and then after they have asked their questions, I'm sure there are going to be many questions, but if every one of our panelists here could give us one sentence of what we can do after we've left this room, one thing we can do after we left this room would be wonderful. So that gives you time to think about that one thing, one sentence that we can take with us, and by that I open the floor for questions.
couple of questions from you, Dr. Do you have any statistic regarding the number of male or female? The public, they think that the woman, they refer to the psychiatrist, psychologist, much more than male. But this is a stereotype of thinking. I myself, when I was in Iran, that's what they said, that they thought all of the women are sick because, they cannot use our power. And they cannot use their power. They say, okay, she's sick. I found it that the number of women, the number of men, they were a problem for the family, more than female. But more female, more women, they came to the clinic because there was something badly sick at home. So I wonder if that is, or the number of, for example, the number of you have any statistic about that, the number of the women in prison that shows something, because I have that statistic. I want to say that still, if I am correct myself.
Excellent. Thank you for that question.
Actually, at macro level, basically societal level, I'm not exactly sure, but I do know that obviously women are much more likely to frequent mental health professions as well as medical health professions because, again, they have a much easier time to ask for help and they're very much more in tune with their own health and their husbands and their children. So obviously they're going to go more. As our societies are becoming again post-industrial and men are incorporating some of the female, feminine values and so on, I think they're having a much easier time going to ask for help. And Dr. Artin, that I have worked with him a number of years, is also familiar. I think men usually somaticize and they see that the psychological issues as something more physical, so they're more likely to go and get help, saying that they have the body ache or they have anxiety or whatever, and their blood pressure goes up, their cholesterol goes up, and women are more likely to go there and talk about depression and issues about the everyday living. So, and for prison, I think, as you said, obviously, it's violence and aggression. The number of prisoners are by far are probably 90% are men and 10% are women. And women being in prison and incarceration has mostly to do with self-defense or mostly petty theft or something that they have to do with being the support of the men they were living with. But men are mostly in prison for violent behavior and so on. So I don't know if it answered you, but the good news is, in my case, for example, I have at least 70 to 80% male patients and 20% female. And that's very interesting because men are more and more likely to go to therapy than before.
Excellent. Thank you for your question.
One comment, one question, and remark. At the beginning of the session, I noticed that we had 2/3 of the people here female and 1/3 male, and I noticed now we have more male. So men are going to win as far as patients is concerned. We should give a hand to the other thing is that I was looking at these things that these people said, and it's wonderful to share their knowledge with us. I always ask myself a question, why do women think that they should reach the level of men? Somebody's tough, it's an Iron Lady, or CEO of IBM is now women, and they're out there. And when you look at these people, they are tougher than men. They're banging on the table when they talk. tough people, so they get accepted to this male chauvinist society. Why not we re-educate the men to learn from the power of and the beauty of women, you know? But my question is from the panelists. There was a lot of great data to think about and meditate about, but I'd like to know what's the best approach today, tonight, when I go home, I can apply to my life from tomorrow morning, Monday. I mean, is it religious, or what should I do? What's the most urgent thing I can do to contribute to the society to make the world better, and especially for the female side, you know, to my wife, to my family, to my neighbors, and all that. You know, small remedy would help, I think. You know, the other stuff is philosophical and it takes a long time, 200 years. Thank you very much.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think every man here should ask that question. So we'll answer it for everyone. Honey, are you listening?
I wasn't. Can you repeat that again?
You wasn't listening. Which one of our panelists would like to answer that?
I can say one word about it. Do more dishes. In the house, women are stuck with what we call the second shift. They work outside and they work inside. And like when Mr. Riaz invited me to give a talk, I was mostly spending most of my life, my time cleaning the house, washing, cooking I don't know, but I did some cooking. And because my son and his wife and his baby were coming over, and so I think this second shift, basically doing housework and taking care of children, is something that men have to take home with them and participate in, because otherwise women are doubly tired.
Yes, excellent. Honey, that was for you. Anyone else? Thank you.
Yeah, in fact, if there is an urge for you to do anything, I strongly recommend not to do anything. Just let it sink, and by itself you will come up with ideas later. This is because part of your overall behavior in the long run. So actually somebody else also mentioned not to do things based on urge.
See, I love it how our female panelists start doing something and how our male panelists do nothing. So I don't know. Dr. Curry, please.
I think that actually, for men, the good men you are is still here. The work of building the other wing to help achieve that balance and the strength that I talked about, coming from men is 10 times more powerful. That women advocating for women's rights or whatever it is that is being advocated, the voice, the weight of the voice is not the same. So for that, I'm saying that at the personal level, for the men, you know, it's the yin and the yang. All this we talk about, from Jungian and whatever. From my own culture, I've always understood the yin and the yang philosophy. If you know the sign of the yin and the yang, that we all have within ourselves, whether it's you're looking at the black part and the white part, the male, the female, it's the balance of the two. We always contain the sign itself. It's a meaning that we contain the opposite of ourselves within. So therefore, at the personal level, my suggestion is beginning to look inward and embrace that opposite of the maleness in you, and looking to the female side of yourselves. The second part, extending in the family, is really helping your own family, those who are around you, to come to a different level of awareness. Because if you're not aware, then it's hard to, at a conscious level, to take action. And third is extending yourself, and the part that I talked about being action is actually doing something about it, because a dream without a plan, design, and action is still just a dream. So the Women on the Move Network organization that helps young girls, we have 2 men on the board. I really give them 10 times more respect, to really being able to be bold and to serve in an organization that helps young girls. So that's the kind of action I think men, you're asking, can do. It's one step at a time, from personal to your own family, and then extending it to your community.
Excellent. Thank you very much. We have several more questions. Please, next question.
For the educators in the room, why can't we make the human in the making a lesson that can be taught at a young age in schools? Incorporate that in our education. I mean, we teach the kids math and science and workshop, woodshop, I mean, all this stuff, but yet the most important lesson is how to be a human. And I don't know how we would go about it as a society to start incorporating that in our school system, so they learn the lessons from early on, not only at home, but in the level of the society, how they're supposed to behave and how they're supposed to value all these other things that we're talking about.
Excellent question. Who would like to answer that? Dr. Beto, please, under the mic. Thank you.
Technically, a universal curriculum of education should be aimed at answering that question, where children are exposed, regardless of their gender, to a more balanced, harmonious system of education that addresses the needs of both genders as humans and brings out the hidden potentials that teachers have in the back of their mind, and they are also aware of their biases, and parents are aware of their biases. Like if a father interrupts the daughter more than the son, then maybe he can gain some degree of awareness so that he can reduce that interruption. As it was mentioned earlier, awareness should be the first step before we can take action on something, and then have a design, a plan, and then carry forward. So that is how I see it, as a solution to introducing human in the making, which is a wonderful concept, and the ideals are very high, but that essentially should be in the form of a universal curriculum that is taught to both sexes throughout the globe, which is really a prerequisite for bringing about world peace. Because our education system, first of all, is not balanced, and then there are a lot of schools globally, since human in the making really has got global perspective, is where boys are educated separately from girls, therefore they don't hear each other, therefore they don't know each other or one another, and then they end up getting married to one another, and they don't know each other because they have never heard each other at school, which that serves a very important purpose. But you can always go to the principal of the school and say, I went to this conference at Human in the Making, this is the mission statement, how can we implement at least even a portion of this within the educational system of this particular school? I think that would be a wonderful action-oriented type of an endeavor.
Excellent, excellent suggestion. Question?
Actually, an answer perhaps, or one answer to the question this gentleman raised, is that tomorrow change the conversation. Instead of going to the office and saying, well, what did you do this weekend? Tell them what you did this weekend. Tell them what you heard this weekend. Tell them about what you learned this weekend. And one of the things you learned perhaps that's new to you, or you really thought about it for the first time or more, is that, I heard something about, well, what I can do for my daughter, what I can do for my spouse, what I can do for my mother, and change that conversation from, oh, did you see Dancing with the Stars, or did you see the Laker game? Change the conversation. When you go to lunch with someone, you have opportunities to go with someone different every single day to lunch. Change the conversation and make this part of what you do with your life.
Excellent, excellent suggestion. Thank you. Question? How much more time do we have? I know that we're supposed to finish at 5:30. Now? Okay. Very good. Last question then. Thank you.
I better make it a good one then. The question I have is, and I'm looking at this on a spiritual basis. Are all these problems that we're talking about today, women, education and everything, are these in fact not spiritual problems that we're having if we are in fact a spiritual being? And what ideas and what things can we do, other than making ourselves more aware of these spiritual things, can we do to increase this within our society?
Very good. Thank you. Who would like to answer that?
Just very briefly, these are human problems. When we say spiritual, sometimes the issue of spirituality becomes vague because it's not all that definable. These are human problems that we need to find proper principles, that the principles could be spiritual principles, and then apply those principles to contextually to real life situation. This is why Abdullah Abbas says, use your mind. He emphasizes that. He says, use your thinking, use your way of seeing the world from the mental perspective, the strength of your mental solutions to the problems. But at the same time, this is spiritual principles and moral principles as a foundation, as a point of reference. But again, human problems have to be also solved by humans having proper reference to spiritual problem, spiritual principles, and decide amongst ourselves as humans, by having interest in this area, and by thinking as much as possible, as clearly as possible, to come up with solutions to human problems. And I think if our motives are good, and we're not running for any political office, and if we are focused to carry on this ever-advancing civilization as the aim of this foundation is, then I'm sure we will succeed with a degree of effort.
Please.
I think this is a very important question that you asked. I have a little bit of difficulty with the word spiritual. If the spiritual is defined in formative stages, that is to say, a spiritual person is a person who has a religion, the person who prays, then I have a little bit of difficulty to understand the word spiritual. But if the spiritual means that we look at everything in a way that our vision is world embracing rather than confined to our own selves, or as Melody emphasized, if we concentrate on undiscovered self within rather than being selfish, then we are actually walking in the path of spirituality. When we use religion and science as a means, not the end, then we are walking on the path of the spirituality. In other words, at least based on my limited understanding, spirituality cannot be defined. It has to be manifested. How do I know that I am closer to the path of spirituality? When my prayer is, I quote now, "Oh God, help me to see things the way that they actually are, not the way that they seem to be. Oh God, help me to understand my own inner conflicts, and help me to engage in a holy war." And holy war meaning war using humanitarian means to fight those unrealistic desires desires which create hates. Holy war, which means for me, holistic approach. When I fight with the evils of the world using a holistic approach, humanistic approach, then I call myself a spiritual. So you are right that our problems, whether it is individual, family, politics, is because we are not a spiritual. But a spirituality, as Jamal can give you 2 hours lecture on it, is not idol worship, is not to just do things because of habit. Rather, spirituality only comes about when there is an authenticated value system, as Melody was referring to. This is why we never know whether we are spiritual or not unless we are tested. I end with this very famous statement that is shared by sociologists, psychologists, and also the religious organizations that I know of. The degree of the universality of our vision determines how spiritual we really are. When we come to the point that somebody else's pain is felt by me, and I show empathy, not sympathy, when I do not have any agenda, when I do kindness to others, I am not kind to you because I want to convert you, because I want to increase numbers, I want to gain something. That is when the spirituality begins. This is why spirituality is not a concept, is not a material things. It is perhaps a dynamic that we need to create.
Excellent. Thank you. All right, dear panelists, one thought, one final thought, one sentence. Please leave us with one final thought. Dr. Martin, we'll start with you.
Treat others the way you like to be treated, unless you are a psychopath.
Mr. Riazaki.
Try to be your real self. Be who you really are. And that is harmonize your thoughts, your feelings, your actions with your belief systems, and try to go after belief systems that creates nobility in you and maintains unity of humankind.
Dr. Terry.
Say use knowledge in the service of mankind.
Excellent. Thank you. Dr. Curry.
I would say dive deep and fly high to be in touch with all of the spiritual qualities that we're endowed with.
Thank you. Dr. Bailey.
I guess I would say, to be aware of the flaws that you may have that you so easily see in others. And when you see a flaw in somebody else, see if that's not, something you need to look at and address that first of all.
Excellent. Dr. Martin.
And change starts at home. If we want to change, to see change outside of ourselves, we need to change from within and our actions, and let our visions be world embracing and not confined to our own selves.
Beautifully said. Thank you very much.